Welcome one and all to Jenny's Commerce Land Business Studies Chapter 3. So in our previous chapters, we have seen about Chapter 1 and 2. Today, we are going to see about Chapter 3, that is Business Environment. Subscribe my channel by clicking on the bell icon that you see on the screen. So today's topic is Business Studies Chapter 3, Business Environment. So the contents for today's session would be 1. Introduction. 2. Meaning of business environment. 3. Importance of business environment. 4. Dimensions of business environment. And 5. The Indian industrial policies. These are the contents that are necessary for studying about chapter 3. Okay, if you cover these 5 points, then you're very well done with the chapter 3. Moving forward, introduction to business environment. Now, what is this business environment? In our day-to-day life, we hear about environment, right? Environment should be clean, it should be protected from the pollution and many other things, right? So now what is this business environment? Is it something related to our environment? Let's check it out. A business can be established, but to successfully sustain a business, the business needs resources like finance, for which has to depend on financial institute. As we all know, finance is the bloodline of any business. Acceptance of social norms for which it has to depend on society. Proper market conditions for which it has to depend on the market. The sale of product or services for which it has to depend on the customers. The labor for which it has to depend on society. Then there are natural resources and raw materials for which it has to depend on nature, and legal support of the government for which it has to depend on the government. These are many factors and dimensions that affect the business environment. So, as we see, the surrounding around us is our environment. The same way, the environment around a business is nothing but the business environment. So, there is a market that which the business depends upon. There is some customers that the business depends upon. The labor or the employees who help in working of the business, that is the society which it is dependent upon, as well as the raw materials and natural resources which are required for making some products or services. For that also it is dependent on the nature, as well as it also requires the support of the government. So it is dependent on the government as well. So all these things constitute a business environment. So there are many factors and dimensions that affect the business environment. So we'll be seeing it in our uh, further slides. So these factors are many different components of a single concept. So business environment is a mixture of all these content. Moving forward, what is the meaning of business environment? Now we saw an intro about what is business environment. Now we need to see what is the meaning of business environment. So, the definition of business environment: the sum total of all individuals, institutions, and other forces that are outside the control of a business enterprise, but business still depends upon them as they affect the overall performance and sustainability of the business. So, these are the individuals as well as the institutions as well as other forces that are outside the control of a business. Say, labor. Can anyone control them? No. Today they are into one company, but tomorrow if they get a better opportunity, they can switch to some other company, right? So the same way, all these factors are not in the control of a business, but the business still depends upon all these factors. So this is nothing but the business environment. It is required for the overall performance as well as the sustainability of the business. Now, the forces which constitute the business environment are its suppliers, competitors, consumer groups, media, government, customers, economic conditions, market conditions, investors, technologies, trend, and multiple other institutions. Working externally of a business constitute its business environment. These forces influence the business even though they are outside the business boundaries. As I said, an example of the competitors, I mean the employees. If one employee is working for one company, will he lifelong work for that company? No, right? If he gets some other better opportunity, he may switch his job. Same way the consumer as well. Today they are preferring our product. Will it be the same every time? No. Some other day, some other competitive product is there in the market, they will switch. So these are the things that are not in the control, but really affect, and the business is also dependent on them, and that is called the business environment. Now let's move forward. Let's see the importance of business environment. So the business environment enables to identify business opportunities. As we are always focused on the facts that influence the business, we always have an eye on the opportunities as well to sustain those factors. Therefore, it enables to identify the business opportunities. Next one is helps in tapping useful resources. So we see that a competitor is doing making use of some technology or so, we also adapt that in our day-to-day working. So it helps in tapping useful resources. So we find out certain resources that is hidden in the eyes of somebody else, and we introduce something new, and therefore we make a optimum utilization of the resources available in our environment. Coping with the changes. So if we are always bothered about all the factors that affects the business environment, we can also cope up with the changes that happens. That can be a technological changes, procedural changes, whatever it may be, we can cope with the changes. Next, it helps in assisting and planning. So this also helps in planning. How? So now we are always keen about the opportunities that are around it. We are making the optimal utilization of the resources. Therefore, what happens? We also cope up with the changes that are happening around. So for implementing all these things, what we need a planning. And therefore, the if we are keen about the business environment, then we also get a help in planning. Helps in improving performance. Suppose some new changes have been introduced in the market and our competitors are not aware of this, and we implement it better than somebody else, so it helps in improving our performance. So these are the importance of the business environment. Let's move forward. Now let's see the dimensions of business environment. So now we saw the introduction, what is business environment? We saw the meaning of business environment, we saw the importance, and now we'll see the dimensions. Dimensions are nothing but the parts that complete a business environment. So the diagram over here shows us various parts. So there is a business organization, and it constitutes of economic environment, technological environment, socio-cultural environment, business environment, global environment, political legal environment, as well as emerging challenges and opportunities. So we have also heard about, you may also have heard about the SWOT analysis. So in SWOT analysis also we do compare the emerging opportunities as well as the threats that are there in the business environment. So emerging challenges and opportunities are also a part of the dimensions of an external environment. Now let's see each of these dimensions in detail. First one is economic environment. So economic environment, the name itself conveys that it is a environment that is dependent or that is related to the economic condition of a country. So there are certain factors that showcase the economic condition. So first one is the rate of inflation. So inflation, we know inflation is a condition wherein the prices of the commodity rises up, right? So the rate of inflation also is a factor that affects the economic environment of a business. How? The simplest way to understand inflation is to see it as rising prices. If the economy is in the state of boom, where business is flourishing and everyone is earning good amount of money, which results in the increase in purchasing power of the consumer, this means that the producer is able to sell his commodity at a higher price in the market. Whereas in the state of depression in the economy, the purchasing and investing power of the customer falls down. As a as the firms can't influence the general factors of the business environment, it has to change itself in order to survive the change, and the producer has to re-establish the prices of his commodity for people to afford it. So for this, understanding this point, we can take the example of the current situation. uh, After post pandemic, everything was just getting on the right track, and now again some uh, you know rules and regulations, or we can say some restrictions have been imposed on the people. So this also affects the business, right? So what the business have to do, they cannot increase the price, so they have to find a way wherein they can get their profits as well as make the product affordable for the people. So this is nothing, this is all about the rate of inflation. Now, the second is the demand and the supply. So, demand and supply are the two important forces that we study in economics, right? So, demand is nothing but the uh, purchasing power of an consumer, and supply is the amount of the product that we can supply in order to satisfy that uh, purchasing power. So when a business identifies a profitable opportunity, they are observing the existence of a potential demand for the product, and the businesses which can foresee potential profits have an incentive to increase production. Demand and supply of a commodity in the market influence the business environment enormously. This factor is based on the demand of a commodity in the market and the producer's ability to produce it on time. So there is a desire to purchase the product, but is the producer able to provide it on time? So this factor also comes under the economic environment. Moving forward, the third one, that is the economic policies. Governments seek out to control the business environment in order to meet a range of objectives. This includes stability, predictability, health and safety. So these are certain points that the government uh, tries to control when it comes to the business environment. So local, state, and national policies affect the planning and operations of business deeply. Economic policies are drafted to direct the economic activities. They include import and export, employment, tax structure, industry, public expenditure, public debt, foreign investment, etc. So these are the places where the economic policies can be implemented in order to control the business environment. So who does all these things? The government drafts the economic policies. So moving forward, the first one was the economic environment. Now we'll see what is the social environment. Social environment relates to our culture and tradition, the surroundings, right? So the first point under this is the culture and traditions. In India, the culture and traditions influence a majority of business. Traditions means the social practices that is passed down from one generation to another. For example, Diwali, Christmas, and Eid. These festivals proved to be a profitable period for electronics, sweets, greeting cards, and restaurant businesses. The business should plan its strategies according to the traditions and social practices of a country. So, this is how the culture and traditions influence our business. If you plan accordingly, then we can meet the demand at that time, and we can supply the need of the consumer at the particular time, and therefore we can get a great profits during the festive season. Now, next is the social trends. So trends also matter, right? So each and every day there is a change in the lifestyle and the health and the fitness. Every day something new pops up. So the government, I mean, the business also should be ready for such changes. So social trends in a business society are proportional to the demand of for the product. The example of the social trend is health and fitness. The products such as diet foods, diet drinks, and fitness centers have given a new face to the industry of health and fitness. So, in a similar manner, it can also affect the company who is producing this diet foods, right? So, this is how social trends affects the business environment. Now, moving forward, values. So, values is also one thing that comes under the social environment. So, values can be called as a standard society keeps about itself, such as freedom, social justice, and equal opportunities. So, when it comes to culture and tradition, there is also one thing that pops in, that is the values. So, the standard society things should be maintained. That is a social justice as well as equal opportunities, freedom to all the citizens. So business should also keep an eye on these particular points. Next, we'll see the legal environment. So this is the third dimension of the business environment, and it is legal environment. So the legal environment includes the laws passed by the government as well as the decisions rendered by various commissions. So these are related to the laws that are passed by the government as well as certain commissions. We have heard, right? Fifth Pay Commission or some various other commissions that are being, that is a group of people that form to decide upon a particular uh, topic, and the agencies at every level of government. It's important that every business must function according to the law of the area in which it wishes to operate. Not obeying the rules can result in legal trouble for the business. In India, business firms are required to have complete knowledge of the acts like Companies Act 1956, Consumer Protection Act 1986, Industrial Disputes Act 1947, as well as Competition Act 2002, and so on. So there are various acts and laws that have been enacted by the government for a healthy working of a business. So these points must be followed by the business, else it will result in a legal trouble for the business. So legal environment is another dimension that comes under the business environment. Moving forward, technical environment. Now, this is another dimension that falls under business environment. Now, let's see what comes under technical environment. The primary forces that are responsible for improvement in the scientific field and new innovations being introduced in the market for improving the quality of goods and services and techniques for operating businesses more efficiently are known as technological factors. So these factors are improvement in the scientific field as well as new innovations. And why are these being introduced in the market? To improve the quality of goods and services as well as the techniques for operating business more efficiently. Just like two sides of the same coin, technological changes are threats to some organizations and opportunities to others. So when new technologies pops in, it is a threat to one certain industry and it is an opportunity for some other industry. The introduction of television was major blow to the industry of drama, radio and cinema industries. Mobile phones have snatched the market from telephones. So in this way, when it is a profit for one or it's an opportunity for one, it is a threat for the other. These days, the online food delivery businesses are emerging in the market, which is which is using smartphone technology, that is apps to order food online. It is a major change in the food industry business and has affected the restaurant industry tremendously. So these days we do order online using certain apps like Swiggy, Zomato, etc. Right? So these has tremendously affected the restaurant industries wherein they do not have these apps and they are following the traditional way. So it is an opportunity for one industry, whereas it is a threat for the traditional restaurant industries. New innovations are occurring in medicine, telecommunications, and biotechnology. The recent advancement in the market of autonomous cars, that is driverless cars, is proving to be a major threat to the business of self-driving car industries. So these days, advancement in the market of autonomous cars, that is the driverless cars, have been coming in. So it is a threat to the business of self-driving car industries. Same is the case with the electronic cars that has been introduced. Tata is already into that. So the other industries are also finding ways to uh, face this threat that has occurred to them. Now the next one is political environment. So this is somewhat related to the legal environment, but there is some difference. So let's find out what is the difference. This factor consists of external factors such as political stability and peace in the country, the foresight of the ruling party and its perspective towards business. Needless to say, the political environment is easily the most important dimension of the business environment. So this plays a key role in the business environment as it decides what is ideology of the party which is dominant in the country. So as the parties keep on changing, the rules of the business also keep on changing, right? So what is the what is the ideology of the ruling or the dominating party, that would be the prevailing one in the country. For example, after globalization, India let foreign companies enter Indian markets for giving a boost to different industries such as food processing industry, the technological industry. Business functions with nature and framework of the political party. The components of political environment consist of constitution of the country, political stability, political ideology, political outlook on business sectors, the extent of government's intervention, and the degree of politicization of business and economic issues. So, uh, the political part of a country plays a major role in framing the business environment. Next, we'll see Indian industrial policies. So we have covered the dimensions, the major dimensions of the business environment. So these are the dimensions on which questions can come in your question paper. So if you're doing with all these dimensions, then you're pretty much done with the dimensions of business environment. Now moving forward, the next important point in this chapter is Indian industrial policies. So there was certain policies that were formulated from time to time in order for the betterment of the industries in India. So, at the time of independence, the Indian economy was facing severe problems of illiteracy, poverty, low per capita income, industrial backwardness, and employment. After India attained its independence in 1947, a sincere effort was made to begin an era of industrial development. The government adopted rules and regulations for various industries. The industrial policies introduction proved to be a turning point in Indian industrial history. So we know that pre-independence and post-independence, the initial years was really tough for our country. But when the LPG, that is the liberalization, privatization, and the globalization policy had come into picture, it totally changed the industrial outlook of India. So let's move forward. Now, what is an industrial policy? Industrial policy is a document that sets the tone in implementing, promoting the regulatory roles of the government. So, it is a tone that is required, or it is a document that is required for implementing and promoting certain regulatory rules. Now, what is this regulatory rules that are common for all the industries? Why it is made so that no industry should be lagging behind, or some industry is the ruling industry? Such things should not happen. There should be an equal opportunity to everyone. Therefore, regulatory rules of the government to formulate this thing, industrial policy is being formulated. It was a great effort to expand the industrialization and uplift the economy to its deserved heights. It signified the involvement of Indian government in development of the industrial sector. Moving forward, the first one is the industrial policy of 1948. Now, what is this industrial policy? The first industrial policy after independence was announced on 6th April 1948. It was presented by Dr. Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, then industry minister. So the industry minister of that time introduced this policy, and his name is Dr. Shyam Prasad Mukherjee, and he had announced this first industrial policy after independence on 6th April 1948. The main goal of this policy was to accelerate the industrial development by introducing a mixed economy where private and public sector was accepted as important in the development of the economy. It saw the Indian economy in socialistic pattern. So earlier the Indian economy was a socialistic pattern, and after the introduction of this industrial policy, it started adopting the mixed economy, that is wherein private and public both play a important role. The larger industries were classified into four categories: industry with exclusive state monopoly, state in strategic industries, industries with government control, industries with mixed sector, industry in the private sector. So in these four categories, the industries were uh, categorized. Now moving forward, the second one. So in the first one, it was introduced in 1948, and the main aim was to introduce the mixed economy concept into the business, and the larger industries were broken down into four. Now the second one is the industrial policy resolution that was introduced in 1956. The second industrial policy was announced on April 20, 1956, which replaced the policy of 1948. The features of this policy were a new classification of industries. Earlier, it was the large industries were breaking into four, but now there was some new classifications, non-discriminatory and fair treatment for the private sector, promotion of village and small-scale industries, to achieve development by removing regional disparity and labor welfare. So these points were put forth when the Industrial Policy Resolution 1956 had come into picture. So we can see that majorly there were a discrimination between the private and public sector. So this was to eliminate that, as well as to promote the village and small scale industries, also to remove the regional disparity and to introduce labor welfare, as well as there was a new classification of the industries. Now, moving forward, summarize the policy of 1956, in which the state was given a primary role for industrial development, as capital was scarce and business was not strong. So, this policy gave a primary role to whom? The state, and the state solely was responsible for the industrial development, as the capital available with the company was scarce, that is equal to nothing or zero, or we can say less, and the business also was not so strong. Now moving forward, the third one, that is Indian Policy Statement 1973. So after 1950s, another policy was introduced in 1973, and it is the Indian Policy Statement. The Indian Policy Statement of 1973 identified high priority industries with investment from large industrial houses, and foreign companies were permitted. Now, the foreign companies' investment also were permitted along with the large industrial houses. Large industrials were permitted to start operations in rural and backward areas with the view of developing those areas and enabling the growth of small industries around. And so the basic features of this Indian policy statements were: the policy was directed towards removing the distortions. It provided for closer interaction between the agriculture and industrial sector. Priority was given towards generation and transmission of power. The list of industries reserved for small scale industry sector was expanded. The special legislation was made to protect cottage and small scale industries were introduced. So in the previous policy also there was a focus on small scale, but here more focus was given, as well as there was a uh, attempt to make a closer interaction between the agriculture and the industrial sector. Fourth one, Indian Policy Statement 1977. So soon after, there was some other policy that was introduced, and the policy was announced by George Fernandes, the Union Ministry of Parliament at that time. The highlights of this policy are: target on development of small scale and cottage industries, that is the household and the cottage industries for self-employment, tiny sectors up tiny sector investment up to 1 lakh, small scale industries for investment up to 1 to 15 lakhs. So again, the target was the development of small scale as well as cottage industries, and this was to eliminate the problem of unemployment that prevailed in our country. Next, large scale sector. Basic industries, infrastructure and development of small scale and village industries, capital goods industries meeting the requirement of cottage industries, high technological industries, that is the development of agriculture, and small scale industries such as petrochemicals, fertilizers and pesticides. So these were the main focuses in large scale sector. Now, third is the restrict the control of big business houses. So everyone was given an equal chance, rather than uh, giving some kind of businesses a greater control and some a lesser control. Then the role of public sector. The development of ancillary industries, that is ancillary means some handicraft industries, as well as to make available expertise in technology and management in small scale and cottage industries. So technology and the management factor was also infused into the cottage and small scale industries with this introduction of this policy. Next was the rehabilitation, revival and rehabilitation of sick units. Sick units means the units that were not making much profit. So how to revive them and how to pick them up from that sick units to a better units. That was also a point under this policy of 1977. Now moving forward, next policy was industrial policy 1980. So there was again an industrial policy that was introduced in 1918, and that policy was announced by the Congress government on July 23rd, 1980. The features of this policy are promotion of balanced growth, extension and simplification of automatic expansion, taking over industrial sick units, regulation and control of unauthorized access production capabilities installed for industrial houses, redefining the role of small scale units, improving the performance of public sector. Again, there was an attempt to improve the business of the country through this policy. That is the policy of 1980, and this was introduced by the Congress government on July 23rd, 1980. Now, the next one is the NIP of 1991. That is a new industrial policy 1991. This was a changing phase of the business of India. The features of NIP 1991 are as follows. The public sector de-reservation and privatization of the public sector through disinvestment, industrial licensing, amendments to monopolies and restrictive trade practices, that is MRTP Act 1969, liberalized foreign investment policy, foreign technology agreements, as well as dilution of protection to SSI and emphasis on the competitiveness enhancement. So these were the major highlights of NIP 1991. So this was when the liberalization, privatization and globalization was introduced. And this was introduced by then economic minister, that is Dr. Manmohan Singh. The all-round changes introduced in industrial policy framework has given a new direction to the future industrialization of the country. There are encouraging trends on the diverse fronts. Industrial growth was 1.7% in 1991 to 1992, and that had increased to 9.2% in 2007-8. The industrial structure is much more balanced. The impact of industrial reforms is reflected in multiple increases in investment, envisaged both domestic and foreign. So this was the changes that this policy had brought into the face of the businesses in India. So thank you for the patient listening. And yes, by this we have come to the end of the slide. So I hope the session was helpful for you all. Jenny's Commerce Land wishes you a successful study of chapter 3. If any doubts, please do keep posting, and do let me know about your queries so that I'll be really happy to help you out with all those queries. So yes, let's stop over here. Uh, I'll be coming soon with a new video that is the important questions from chapter 3.